So let me guess, your home is filled with items that at one point or another you decided definitely needed to be decluttered. But when it came down to actually doing it, you second-guessed yourself and talked yourself out of it because a little voice in your head said, maybe I'm going to actually need this one day. I better keep it just in case. So zero progress ended up getting made. Maybe you even started to realize that you were struggling with this, so you turned to blogs or YouTube to help you find some strategies to get rid of this stuff, and then that didn't really work out either. Now, if this sounds familiar, do not give up. You are not hopeless. Truthfully, none of these things ever worked for me either. But I have found a mental strategy that does seem to work and has inspired genuine change in many of my clients. And that is what I wanted to share with you today. But first, if you're new here, my name's Nena. I help people to declutter their minds and their homes using practical applications of psychology. So if that is a type of support that you may find beneficial, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. And today we're going to be talking about one of the biggest psychological barriers to clearing clutter. Now, just so we're clear, the fear of decluttering can be very real and almost paralyzing in some cases. And there are two specific types of clutter that I have found to be especially difficult for many people to part with. The first is sentimental or memory clutter, and the second is what we are talking about today, which I like to call the just-in-case type of clutter. We can describe this type of clutter as all the things in our home that we aren't using or maybe have never ever used in the past that we think could potentially have some kind of practical use in the future. It can be really difficult for us to let these things go because we start to invent all kinds of scenarios in our mind where these things would be necessary. And when we couple this with guilt that we may be feeling about spending money on these items to begin with, it can be even more difficult to let these things go. Now, I have definitely been there, so I know this struggle very well, but the truth is that the just-in-case excuse for holding on to items is really just a toxic combination of procrastination and fear that keeps our homes so cluttered that they are no longer even comfortable to live in. And what's interesting and even ironic is that this fear is really rooted in not having enough or fearing that we're not going to have enough in the future. When in reality, the much bigger issue here is that we have too much stuff. So much stuff, in fact, that it's actually getting in the way of us being able to live the way we want to. Now, when I used to work with people who greatly struggle with this issue, as I did for many years, I would always try to appeal to their logical side. We'd talk about the research and we'd talk about the practicality of it all. So I would say, things like, we really don't need this enormous stack of towels that we have in the closet here because it is very unlikely that we're suddenly going to have 15 overnight guests. Or, we don't really need to keep all these old, outdated electronics just in case we lose or damage our new ones, because we are never actually going to ever want to use them again. And while all of these things are absolutely true, sharing them never seemed to inspire meaningful change. And what I eventually found to be a lot more effective than talking about the practical side of the issue was to ask people to zoom out and to think about the bigger picture, to contemplate the reality of how all of this clutter is forcing us to live our life in the present. The reality is that so often we are giving up having a home that we love in the now by focusing too much on imaginary events and needs in the future that almost never come into fruition. And when we do this, the desire to hold on to all of these things becomes a greater focus than the quality of our actual life, and the fear of decluttering becomes a barrier to our happiness. And if we think about it, if our worst case scenario in our mind actually happens and we find out that we decluttered an item that we do have a need for in the future, there is a very simple solution. On the extremely off chance that this ever happens, we could borrow, buy, or rent another one. And remember, we're the ones that are in control. We're the ones that are making the decisions. So if we are feeling anxiety about items that are high value or that are impossible to replace that we think we may actually use in the future, we do not have to stress about these items. We can just hold on to them. But keep in mind that there are very few items in your home that are going to actually fit under these categories. Even though when we try hard enough, we can think of an excuse to keep just about everything in our home, the truth is that most of us don't need half of the things that we own. Yes, most items do have a potential use, but that does not mean we need them cluttering up our home or cluttering up our life. But what ends up happening for so many of us is we get caught up in the fear of that potential, usually because we are so focused on the slim chance that the worst case scenario in our head is going to actually happen, where we would have to spend money once again to replace the item. And that fear seems to be completely justified until we take into account what keeping the item is actually costing us. The costs of clutter are immense, and that is a topic that I recently made a video about. I will go ahead and link it down in the description box below, because that is a reality that we definitely need to face. And I know sometimes we can also struggle with the fear of lack, especially if we or someone that we love went through a difficult time where we felt like we needed to keep everything in order to be safe. This is a very real thing that can absolutely increase our anxiety about decluttering. And if that is something that you feel is a personal barrier for you that you'd like a little more support with, that is also another topic that I have a full video about that I will link down in the description box as well. But overall, if we feel like just in case clutter is really starting to overtake our home, sometimes it comes down to asking ourselves the real question at hand. Which reality would I rather live in? Would I rather enjoy a well-lived life now in a comfortable, beautiful, organized home that I and my family love to spend time in, and maybe at some point need to borrow or replace an item that I no longer own? Or would I prefer to live in a cramped, cluttered, disorganized home just so that I can hold on to every single item out of fear that I may need it in the future? We have to ask ourselves if this is a price that we are still willing to pay. And if not, this realization can make it a whole lot easier for us to start letting things go. And the amazing thing is that when we do so, it allows us the time, space, and energy to start living our life in much more intentional, meaningful ways. There is an indescribable feeling of freedom that happens when we stop living in fear of the future and start letting the present moment be everything that we want it to be. And just to be clear, it is perfectly okay to have some just in case clutter. We just don't want it taking over our homes. And take it from me, as someone who used to greatly struggle with clutter, that change is absolutely possible. I used to have rooms and rooms and rooms of just in case clutter, and now I'm down to a singular bin, which is truly unbelievable if you knew how I lived in the past. So just know that you can transform your life, but you're going to have to change your perspective and your mindset, because that is necessary in order to shift your priorities. But if you are ready to declutter your life, you can absolutely do it. So as always, I truly hope that you found today's video to be helpful and insightful. If you did, please like it, share it, and definitely become a subscriber if you aren't one already. I would absolutely love it if you stayed connected. I want to thank you so much for spending time with me today and for investing in yourself. And I hope the rest of your day is extraordinary.